Coach Corey Wayne, and this is my video coaching newsletter. And the topic of today's newsletter is going to be insecurities, regrets, and what ifs. Well, I've got an email here from a viewer, and he's got a condition called neurofibromatosis, which is, I had to look it up. I had never heard of it before. It's like basically like these wart-like bumps that you have on your back or parts of your body. So he's obviously, it's a genetic condition. And so he's obviously insecure about this. And so he shares a story of this girl that I guess he met from this place where I guess she worked in the garden department or whatever. And so he'd been shopping there for a while, and they struck up a conversation and exchanged numbers, and he started going out with her. And things went sideways after a couple of weeks. And he hasn't talked to her in 6 months since then, so he asked me to take a look at what he did and what happened and give him my opinion. So I have a quote that I wrote in this topic, and then we're going to go through and take a look at his email. But basically what really happened was his beliefs, how he perceived himself got in the way of things unfolding naturally like they started to in the beginning, and then it just became a giant fucking train wreck. So the quote says, most people live their lives and focus all of their mental energy on what may or may not happen in the future, or they obsess over what happened to them in the past. This prevents them from enjoying their lives and living in the present moment. When our mind is consumed with what-if scenarios or past regrets, we suffer unnecessarily and miss the gift that life is. If you were to adopt a superior mindset and belief system to keep yourself focused on the present moment, it would be that everything that has happened in your life happened for a reason and on purpose. There are no accidents. There is no imperfection or anything wrong with you. You've only ever done what you were meant to do. What happened, happened, and couldn't have happened any other way. The only thing you would then have to do is to understand the meaning, lesson, and gift of your past so you can gain the wisdom from it, and it will enable you to make the right choices in the future so you can fulfill your destiny. And if you've been watching me for a while, you know that that's pretty much my philosophy and how I look at things that have happened in life. I look at things from the soul perspective or from a spiritual perspective, like a 50,000, like an airplane, like viewing things from a 50,000 feet elevation. You can kind of see the whole picture, but if you're down on the ground at eye level, ground level, you're only going to be able to see what's around you. But when you're in the space above, you can kind of see everything and why things happen. So let's go through his email. He says, "Hey Coach, I'd like to applaud and say bravo for being someone who gives real advice that makes sense. If I would have known your work sooner, I would have done things differently and maybe would have still had a chance with this relationship." Well, if I had $1 for every time I started reading an email and it said, if I had known about your work sooner, you arrived exactly on time. That's the way I look at it. It's like when the student's ready, the teacher appears. And for most people, I appear in their life when something really gets fucked up and sideways in their relationship and their dating life. And when they really get into it, they realize there's all these other factors that really have nothing to do with pickup dating or relationships that affect their ability to be successful picking up women, dating women, and having great relationships with them. He says, I'm 35 years old and I have one major insecurity about myself. I have a condition called neurofibromatosis, NF, and it really messes with my confidence. At the end of the day, from a soul perspective, just say for a minute, before we all came into this life, we came into this life and we chose our parents in order to have, from a soul perspective of growth of the soul, we choose our parents so we can get a certain type of life experience. Good, bad, and different. I mean, even looking into account all the horrible things that happen in the world from a spiritual perspective, maybe that person came into, especially somebody that experiences really horrible, awful things in their life, maybe they came into their life because they'll learn tremendous compassion because of that towards other people. Or maybe they came in essence, to sacrifice themselves for those that they care about. And so there's meaning in that. Like I said, when you look at things from a spiritual perspective, as opposed to looking at the horrible awfulness. I mean, there's instances where like a plane crashes, and only a little baby survives, but everybody else died. I mean, that's pretty obvious. That happened for a reason. Only one little baby survived, and everybody else died. And you could say logically, oh, well, the baby was smaller, so it was easier for it to survive, because if they'd been a bigger adult, they wouldn't have... It's like, come on, man. Or you got somebody that was supposed to be... It was like, who's his name? Seth, I think Seth MacFarlane and Mark Wahlberg were supposed to be on one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center. One of them missed his flight, and the other one decided to go to a different part of the country, so he changed his flight information a day or two beforehand. And then somebody else ended up taking their places on those flights. And you look at that and you go, there were people that were supposed to be in the World Trade Center that morning. They called in sick. They got into a traffic accident. They overslept. They missed their meeting. And everybody was at that meeting died. That's, to me, I look at that from a spiritual perspective, from a soul perspective. It's like, that's just the way, instead of looking at how people exit the world, just you look at it from the perspective of, hey, it was just their time to go. When you have enough family members that are in combat, in wars, and they come back and they have that spirit, because there's no rhyme to reason why certain people live and other people die. It's always the nice guys, got everything to live for, they got a great wife, a great family. They're the ones that get their fucking head blown off. And you got other people that got all these reasons why to not be around, because they really don't have anything to live for from their perspective, yet they come out without a fucking scratch. It's supposed to be that way. It's the way I look at it. It's the way my family members look at it, that have been in war, that have been in combat for over 100 years, and I've been hearing stories about this stuff my whole fucking life. And that's helped shape my perspective on things. And in my own life, there have just been times when I've been in tremendous danger, and there was something around me. I could feel an energy that was around me. There always seemed to be somebody at the right place at the right time, right there to protect me from whatever that danger happened to be. Like I said, when you study quantum physics, things really start to make sense. But the average person is focused on the horribleness of the event, or the way that that person ended up exiting the world or exiting their life. Oh my God. Like I said, when your time's up, it's up. And when it's not, nothing can harm you. So let's continue on. He says, I met this beautiful 23-year-old at her job. She works at a garden center. I shop there often, and she has helped me many times before to find items I needed to buy, but never showed any kind of interest in me. One day, as I walked in the store, she attracted to me like a magnet. She liked my yin and yang tattoo and told me how she also wanted to get the same tattoo. And I told her my cousin did it for me and that I could arrange it for her, so we exchanged numbers. She was even wearing a yin-yang necklace. You probably heard me say before, like attracts like. People who like the same things tend to like each other. Well, obviously, you got a yin-yang tattoo, she's got a fucking necklace. You happen to shop at a place where she works. Energetically, the two of you were drawn together to have an experience. Where most people run into trouble is that they have that experience and then they try to hold on to it and they develop an unhealthy attachment. And when that person blows into your life and then blows out of it just as quickly as they blew into it, and they're upset that that person's no longer there, instead of really looking at it like what Dr. Seuss says, don't be sad that it's over, be glad that it happened. It happened for a reason. You met this woman for a reason. And if she's no longer in your life, well, she came into your life to teach you a lesson, to give you a gift, and you also had one for her. So once you're picking up the pieces, if you will, or trying to look at why something happened the way it did, look at it from a spiritual perspective. What is the gift? What is the lesson? How can this make me a better human being? What can this event or this circumstance or set of circumstances and the memories of what I experienced with this person, what can I take away from it that will help me grow to better prepare me down the road for something even better and more awesome? Because I found in my own life, life gets better with time, and so do your relationships, as long as you're working at becoming a better version of yourself. 1 week later, because I'm sure everybody that's watching this video has somebody that they know in their life who's hard-headed, won't listen to anything, and they keep attracting the same kind of people, and they have the same kind of fucking relationships over and over. Or they go work at a job, things are great for a little while, and then they start bitching about how their job sucks or how bad it is. And then someday, they get fucking laid off or they get fired. And of course, it's never their fault. It's always somebody else's because they're always the victim. Because they don't want to take any responsibility. Everybody watching this video knows people like that. 1 week later, I decided to give her a call just to say a friendly hello. Sure, it was just for a friendly hello. But the good news is you called her. We spoke on the phone for an hour, and she asked me to meet her for a drink of Ozo. I think this guy is from Greece or something like that, so I have no idea what that drink is, but hopefully it's good. And I happily agreed. The chemistry was definitely there. We have the exact same outlook on life, and definitely had lots of coincidences and synchronicity going on. Like attracts like. People who like the same things tend to like each other. That's why I say all the time, go do things that you love and you enjoy. Get involved in hobbies, interests, join clubs, organizations where there's other like-minded people. Because the likelihood of you meeting somebody who looks at the world the same way is much higher as opposed to just randomly walking around the street and hoping to meet or run into your soulmate or the one. When you're supposed to meet that person or that group of people, they just show up right on time. It's like when you met your best friend. You weren't trying to meet a best friend. You weren't like, I'm going to meet a new best friend today. It just, you're going about your life and you met somebody and you just fucking clicked, completing each other's sentences, and you've been friends ever since. It just was effortless and easy. Our first names are the same, however, they're spelled differently. Our dogs' names are similar, and we also look similar. Well, what's interesting is they've done scientific studies, and we tend to be attracted to other people, members of the opposite sex, who have a similar facial structure to our own. She took me back to her bed to get some sleep since it was 4 a.m., but I didn't make any moves on her because of my NF, or his condition. So you were fearful. So in other words, instead of making a move, because at the end of the day, you have this condition. There's nothing you can fucking do about it. All you can do is accept it and say, what's the gift? Why am I like this? How can this help me learn more compassion and be more loving towards other people? Because if you don't have a problem with it, nobody else is going to have a problem. They might be curious and ask you about it, but if it doesn't bother you, it's like me with my freckles. When I was a kid, I was incredibly self-conscious because I always got teased about them. And now it's like girls are always like, oh, your freckles are so cute. It's like, I'm proud of them now. I was like, yeah, baby, you can even play connect the dots. Although, if I did, it would have happened. However, I'm afraid of what kind of reaction she would have. Well, when you ask enough people that are on their deathbed, they don't have regrets about the things that they did. They only have regrets about what they didn't do or the risks that they didn't take. Would you really want to be on your deathbed and say that was the last time you ever got together with this girl? Would you say, yeah, I'm really glad I never tried to kiss her? Or would you go, man, I really wish I'd have kissed her because at least I would have known. I would have spent the rest of my life wondering, what if? Having a regret. I don't have any regrets. People ask me, do you have any regrets? Like, nope. Everything that happened for a reason. It made me who I am today. Even the things that didn't turn out the way I wanted. When I look back on it years later, oh, that happened at the right time. It was perfect. Magnificent experience. After the third day of hanging out, we made love, and she didn't seem bothered by my NF, and even told me she would ask some doctors for advice. You didn't make a big deal out of it. Obviously, she was into you. She didn't care about your little wart-like bumps. Nothing you can do about it. You're born that way. If you look at it as a source of beauty and inspiration, it's something that makes you unique and different. You say, I'm a lizard man, baby. Come up with a fun way to describe yourself. It gives you some things to hold on to when you're grabbing my back and you're digging your fingernails, and you can grab onto my spots. I'm like a leopard. She told me she was falling in love with me in that moment, and she had a plan to move back home, which is off the island, but because she met me, she wanted to stay on the island. At this moment in time, things are going great. After hanging out and hooking up for 2 weeks, her sisters were coming to visit. She hadn't seen them in 2 years. Now this is interesting. She hadn't seen them in 2 whole years, right? And they were going to stay only 5 days, so she told me we can't hang out until they leave. Remember what I talked about in the book? Attraction level cuts through everything. So she's saying, oh, I can't hang out. I'm sorry. I haven't seen my sisters in 2 years. And, all right, baby, we'll give me coffee, change your mind. He says, I was cool with it. So you were non-attached to it either way. You were cool with it. Didn't bother you. You must love in such a way that the person you love feels free. And at least up until this point, you're doing pretty damn well. However, the next day she called me to meet her sister. So she waited a whole day and couldn't take it anymore. And she was so proud of you and so excited she wanted to introduce you to her sisters. She hadn't seen them in 2 years. Remember, she just got done telling you, oh, I can't see you all week because my sister's going to be here. 24 hours later, hey, you want to come hang with my sisters? We all went out for a drink, and at some point her sisters left. How convenient. She and I were talking, and she asked me if we were to have a child, would my NF affect the baby? I told her it was 50-50. She didn't seem happy to hear this, and she told me we should go see a specialist. So this tells me all in her mind she's really thinking about you as a long-term possibility at this point. So this is where things kind of go off the rails. He says, the night after she called me, we spoke on the phone, and by mistake, I spoke to her in a very bad tone of voice because I have some issues with myself when I talk to people on the phone. So in other words, what you're really saying is, I sometimes choose to not exercise any emotional self-control. Because remember, the first time you talked to her on the phone, you talked for a whole hour. And you totally controlled yourself then. But this is your story. This is your way to say, no, that's not my fault. It just kind of happens sometimes when I talk on the phone. Bull fucking shit. You obviously were feeling insecure about something, and so you decided to totally act irrationally emotional, and you fucked it up. He says, I felt like a malaka. He says it's a Greek slang term for meaning a wanker. After I talked to her in that tone, within a minute she told me that she had to go. I'm a peaceful person. So you were being a dick. So you were projecting your bullshit that was inside of you and expecting her to deal with it. Because you figure, hey, we're sleeping together. I just met her sister. So now I can really be an asshole and she'll still love me anyways. So you started treating her harshly. And the reality was you chose to not exercise any emotional self-control. And after the fact, you're like, oh, that's just how I am on the phone. Yeah. Whatever, dude. That's the story that you tell yourself. That's what justifies it. That's why, but you chose the first time you talked to her for a whole hour to exercise emotional self-control, and you were textbook, you were perfect, you were charming, you were sweet, you were exactly the way you needed to be. But at this particular instance, you chose to just totally come unglued and off the rails. He says, the next night I went over to her house, and she told me how she was leaving to go back home to fix things with her dad because they don't talk. Because I had fallen in love with her, I was hurt and kind of cried in front of her. I show my feelings as I feel them. So in other words, translation, I decided to totally come unglued and act like a total meltdown case. I act like a woman, basically, Corey. But again, his story is, I show my feelings as I feel them. No, you just, again, chose to not exercise any emotional self-control. And you justify it by saying, oh, that's just me expressing my feelings. It's not my fault, it's just how I express myself. Well, you didn't come unglued the first time you talked to her. But you chose to, you gave yourself permission to just act like a fucking Fruit Loop. She seemed shocked and had a tear in her face as well. And I asked her if I did something wrong, but she told me no. Sure. 1 week later, I tried calling her and I asked her how she was. And with a crying voice, she started to say that she's trying to forget and hung up. It's been 6 months, she never called me, and she doesn't answer my calls or texts. Well, dude, when a woman hangs up on you like that, you don't ever call or text her again. But when you can continue to act like a nut job and continue to blow her up, hey, please talk to me. I'm really a nice guy. What do you expect? It's like I don't exist to her. Was it lust? No, you just talked her out of liking you because deep down you didn't think you were good enough, and therefore you acted in a way that was totally congruent with that belief. You gave yourself permission to act like a jackass and treat her harshly on the phone, And then when you were with her, you gave her permission to come unglued and act like a fucking woman. And then after the fact, you continued to chase her and blow her phone up and act like a stalker, which really creeped her out and made her realize not only does this guy have this medical condition, but he's a fucking weirdo. And that, I mean, what do you expect? Why would she want to talk to you? What happened to the charming guy who seduced her perfectly the first time around? What happened to that guy? You stopped being the guy that she started to fall in love with. And instead, you became a total fucking Fruit Loop. And then after the fact, you're like, oh, gee, I don't know what happened. I don't know why she doesn't want to talk to me anymore. That's the story you tell yourself. Did I scare her away? Yeah, pretty much. Could I have been a rebound? No, you just talked her out of liking you. I mean, look at your behavior seemed normal, even though you had this unusual medical condition, that you didn't let it bother you at first. And then once you really started to care about her, you put her on a pedestal, started kissing her ass, treating her like a celebrity, constantly treating her like you weren't worthy, and eventually she had to agree with you. Maybe if I didn't speak to her that way. Yep, that was part of it. He says there's an old saying in Greece about the what ifs. They say, if my grandmother had a pair of balls, I would have called her my grandfather. I have not heard that one before. That's interesting. But like I said, I mean, you were doing great until you gave yourself permission to act like a Fruit Loop, which is pretty much probably what you've always done in the past with women. You exercise emotional self-control at first, and then when you kind of think you got them or they're kind of into you a little bit, it's like you totally come unglued and you start acting completely different. You need to be consistent always. You can't be ashamed of the condition that you have because you were born with it. Not just like my freckles. I can't do anything about it. It is what it is. So what? It doesn't define who I am. It's just part of who I am. Your condition doesn't define who you are. It's just part of who you are. It goes with the territory. Like I said, if you come up with some playful ways to talk about it, like I'm a lizard, or gives you something to hold on to when you're really tearing into me, when you're riding me like a fucking wild stallion, if you joke about it like that, chicks are going to find that confident and charming, and they're going to like it. And that's exactly what you did at first with her. And then, like I said, after 2 weeks, you just totally came unglued and acted like you were the complete opposite of the guy she had fallen for. She couldn't have reacted to you any other way. So what's the lesson? What's the takeaway from this? Well, be consistent, consistently love who you are, and consistently act the same way with somebody that you were in the beginning, whether it's 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, 20 years later. You got to be consistent, and that's your problem. You're not consistent. And because deep down you're worried that you're not good enough, you're able to exercise self-control for a short period of time, and then you give yourself permission to just totally lose it. So if you choose to lose it with a girl and she doesn't want to talk to you anymore, the only person that you can blame for the fact that she's ignoring you and you haven't talked to her in 6 months is the guy you see in the mirror. Dating is like a game of tennis. You hit the ball over the net and you got to wait for the other person to hit it back. And in this particular case, you hit the ball over the net, she didn't respond right away, and so you went out and you got the automatic ball machine, you filled it up with tennis balls, and then you put it on super speed. And then you just started rapid firing, just shooting balls at her, and eventually she ran off the tennis court. And now you're sitting there with all the the balls all over the tennis court, and it's just you, and she's not there. And she thinks you're a nut job. I mean, what do you expect, dude? So if I were you, I'd be reading my book 10 to 15 times and getting out there and applying it to become better at this. And it would be helpful for you if you had 3 or 4 women in your life that you could practice with until you get to the point where you can consistently act this way. Doesn't matter whether it's 2 weeks, 20 months, 20 years, you're consistent. And that's the only thing I see here is your behavior just simply not consistent. So that's what you really need to work at. So if you'd like to get my help personally, the quickest way is to book a paid phone, Skype, or email coaching session. You can choose any of those options by going to my website, clicking the Products tab at the top of your screen, and just follow the instructions for booking whichever option works best for you. And I will talk to you soon.